Political Club has been involved in many debates for local and state elections over the past 12 years. The club also hosts a variety of different guests as a part of a speakers series. This series lasts for the fall, and last year went through the winter. Many speakers from varied political parties and backgrounds come to speak to students after school. The topics of the speeches range from budget cuts to state politics to even national issues. The club also took a trip to Washington, D.C. last year, and for previous years before that, with a program called Close Up. Through the week in D.C., we learned about the federal government and the process through which bills and laws are passed into legislation. The Political Club offers students a space to learn about government and the happenings of our world in a bipartisan community.
This election season is historic in that there's a primary in both parties. And for that reason, we have separated the forum into two panels, Republican and Democratic respectively. Each panel will be asked a series of questions by myself and Sarah and Noah. In the case of the Democratic panel, candidates have or will flip a coin to determine who goes first, and the order will rotate with each question. After the initial prompt is asked, the designated candidate will be offered 3 minutes to speak about the subject. After their time is up, the following candidate will be offered a 3-minute speaking period. If one of the candidates is mentioned by name in a response, they will be given 30 seconds to respond. Reminders of time remaining will be shown to candidates by the timekeepers, who are in the front over here. After all the questions have been answered and discussed, we will move to the next question. No candidates or campaigns have seen or had access to the questions tonight, but were given general categories like charter revision, recommendations, taxes, and economic development.
Keep in mind that this is meant to be policy-oriented forum, not so much a debate. Candidates are encouraged to challenge ideas and proposals of their opponents, but we want to strongly discourage personal attacks and inappropriate comments. Following the forum, candidates will be available in the lobby for questions and discussion.
Unfortunately, incumbent selectman Mr. Bruce Farmer was unable to attend tonight's forum, and to quote Mr. Farmer, he has unavoidable business with the state. Mr. Farmer sent us his biographical information to share with you in his absence. Bruce Farmer, a 34-year resident of Clinton, has for the last 22 months served as Clinton's first selectman. He has had a lifetime commitment to public services for churches, nonprofits, and the town of Clinton, including serving on the Wetlands Committee, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Board of Finance. Mr. Farmer's daughter was a graduate of Morgan School. Due to Mr. Farmer's absence, our questions will be directed to Mr. Kirk Carr, Republican candidate for First Selectman. Now Sarah would like to introduce Mr. Carr.
Kirk Carr currently serves as an alternate on the Board of Finance and on the Economic Development Commission, and is treasurer of Clinton Placemakers. He previously served on Clinton's Planning and Zoning Commission, where he co-authored Clinton's plan of conservation and development. Prior to moving to Clinton, he had a 38-year career with Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal, where he was assigned to a variety of advertising sales and operational executive roles in Dallas, Cincinnati, Detroit, Hong Kong, and New York. He served as New York chapter president and international chairman of the Business Marketing Association. He is a graduate of Texas Tech University, where the School of Mass Communications honored him as an outstanding alumnus. He and his wife, Jennifer, have been married 44 years and have 2 sons and 3 grandchildren. And now for our first question.
Why are you seeking the office of First Selectman? What skills, talents, abilities best suit you for this position? Describe one activity, committee, or subcommittee you've been involved in within the town. What has it meant to you, and how has it shaped and impacted the town?
First of all, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize a few people. First of all, Eric Bergman, who is the faculty advisor for the Political Club, and of course, these wonderful students who are here tonight. I want to thank them, as well as the principal, Carrie Hackness, and Superintendent of Schools, Marianne O'Donnell. Thank you for hosting this event tonight, and thank all of you for coming out and sharing your time with us. You're here tonight to evaluate the qualifications of those of us who seek office. 2 years ago, Republicans, myself included, rejoiced when a majority was elected to the Board of Selectmen and a Republican filled the seat of First Selectman. We all expected change, but we got more of the same, much more. As I gathered petitions, signatures for primary petitions from Republicans, I encountered a universal disappointment. And I discovered that people have lost some confidence and become somewhat cynical about the entire process. That is why Phil Single and I decided to offer Clinton voters better choices through the primary process. So what do I intend to do differently? First of all, my door will be open and I will be available to listen. This is not another empty campaign promise. Very much help here from the timekeepers. That is not an empty promise. What Clinton needs is communication. I will be available to do this. The other thing we need is accountability and action. And I will apply my considerable energy and my work ethic as your first selectman to reduce taxes. I'm not quite sure what those signs mean. Is that how much time I have left, or remember? Okay. And I expect that as your first selectman, I will be able to review all contracts and bring down the high cost of taxes in this town that are killing it. And that is why I'm asking those of you who are disappointed Republicans to come out next Tuesday and vote for me and for Phil Single. Thank you very much.
And for the next question, with the possible loss of nearly $6 million in education cost-sharing grants from the state, how would you propose to restructure our current local tax system? And what cuts or increases, if any, would you recommend?
That is a very challenging question, and one that has been unaddressed by the current Board of Selectmen. They've known since the end of June that we were facing a $6.2 million cut. And so far, and I attend most of the Board of Selectmen meetings, they have not addressed it. We need to get everybody together to understand that we can't just pass on to taxpayers a 10.2% increase. We have to find places to consolidate. We have to find places where there's waste. But most of all, we have to realize that the people of Clinton, that there is a limit to how much they can pay in taxes. And they are at that limit and have been for some time. We currently have a $3.3 million shortfall because we did not anticipate the cuts being as deep as they are. But the most important thing is to get all members, all agencies together and for them to look within their departments for places that they can reduce spending. And they have to make it a priority. And most importantly, they have to understand that what is done is fair and is done equitably and reasonably.
Sure, thank you. For the next question, how might you encourage economic development? What are your thoughts about the town plan and how might we better implement its recommendations?
How do I feel about the town plan or planner?
The town plan.
Okay. Well, as a co-author of the town plan of conservation and development, which I worked on with Christine Goupil and Ellen Kravitz and John Guskowski, I believe that we do need to make this an action plan. There are 167 different specific actions that need to be taken, not just by the Planning and Zoning Commission or by the Board of Selectmen, but by the EDC and Public Works and Water Pollution Control. We need to work together to achieve the objectives of this plan, and most importantly, to achieve development that is good development, that people want in their backyard. You know, there are plenty of opportunities to invite into our town things that people really don't want. What we've got to do is to reach out to those kinds of industries and businesses and commerce that complement the businesses that are already here, that provide services to the people of Clinton that they want, that now they may travel many miles to get, and to not do so in such a way that leaves behind empty, vacant buildings. We need to increase the number of people who are being employed in our town, and we need to also diversify our base so that it is resilient in an economy that has its ups and downs.
Thank you for that answer. Next question, what is your opinion on the recommendations from the Charter Revision Commission, most notably the hiring of a town manager? How would you better coordinate efforts to make communications between town boards and committees?
Well, those are really two questions, but on the issue of the town manager, I have to say I didn't come to this very easily. I did quite a bit of research on various towns, on the metrics, and I found that towns that have town managers and towns that operate the way we do basically did not show a tremendous tangible difference. So I talked to a number of people about town managers. John Allen, who was the chairman of EDC, convinced me that the intangibles stood for a lot. That we could have more professionalism, we could have greater continuity, and that if we had a town planner and not a full-time first selectman, that the pool of people who would be willing to run for first selectman would increase appreciably, and I think we would all be served well by that. The other thing about a town manager is that it provides the continuity, and as we have a new first selectman perhaps every 2 to 4 to 6 years, that learning curve for the new first selectman becomes much better achieved if you have professionalism. So I have come down after also speaking to Bruce Walschlager, who's the former president of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, and who has considerable experience, and he said that he felt that a town manager was clearly a superior form of government, and actually signed the petition calling to put it on the referendum. Unfortunately, the circumstances that we're under now, and any of you who've watched some of the YouTubes of the Board of Selectmen, is this process has been, I hate to say it, but it's been botched. And we've got to do something to try to fix it. We could have a potential crisis on our hands if we don't find some ways to get through this referendum on the town manager in a way that gives us time to appropriate funds for the town manager and to hire a town manager. And so I'm in favor of the town manager, but we have some issues that we have to deal with to get there.
And if you wanted to answer the second part of the question, we'd be happy to give you some more time on how you would better coordinate efforts between town boards and committees to get more stuff done in the town.
Thank you for that. Well, you know, the charter calls for an annual meeting of all the town departments, and in the past that has been somewhat perfunctory, where each of the departments gets up and gives a little bit of a report, but there's no continuing coordination. I think we have to work to have those kinds of meetings more often. The other thing that the charter provides for is for the first selectman and members of the Board of Selectmen or others who he designates to serve as, or she designates, serve as an ex officio member of other boards and commissions, including Board of Education, Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning. Not to just go in as a liaison, but to be actually an active member. Now, they can't vote as ex officios, but they can fully participate, and by doing so, they will empower those various commissions. The current First Selectman has not attended any of the Economic Development Commission meetings, and I think that's a commission that is extremely important to be empowered, and the presence of the First Selectman and the funding of the Economic Development Commission. One of my first acts as First Selectman would be to slash the salary of the First Selectman in half and put those funds, make those funds available for the Economic Development Commission so that it could do some things that it has not had the resources to do. And that would be a very important thing that we could do for this town.
Thank you. Extending kind of beyond the town of Clinton, would you explain, in your eyes, what a healthy relationship between the town of Clinton and the state of Connecticut looks like, and how you would work to improve that relationship?
Well, the state of Connecticut, it's no secret to anybody in here, is in trouble. It is not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. And the fallout is hitting communities like Clinton. It is a Democrat-controlled state, and we have Republican representatives from this area in Hartford. We have to try to reach across the aisle, and I know everybody says that, but we've got to be effective in reaching across the aisle at the state level and at the local level. And one of my proudest, I don't know, I wouldn't call it achievements, but one of the things I'm proudest of is the relationship that I have with Democrats in this town who serve with me on the Board of Finance, on the EDC, serve with me on the Planning and Zoning Commission. We need to try to foster those kinds of relationships in Hartford and also with Hartford. And there's only so much that a First Selectman can do, but certainly by being actively involved in the River Cog, also actively involved in the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, one can have a real impact in Hartford and with Hartford.
And for the next question, what recent zoning decisions do you support, and which ones, if any, would you not support?
Well, there have not been any controversial zoning decisions. Clearly, planning and zoning has been accused of some things recently in letters to the editor that have not been true, not been fair. Especially the charge from one of our selectmen in the Harbor News today that the Mill Pond loss was due to planning and zoning. That's absolutely not true. Planning and zoning could not have done more to accommodate Henry Resnikoff and Mill Pond. If they asked for things, they always got it. They may not have voted unanimously, but they got what they wanted and what they needed. That is not the reason Mill Pond left or pulled the plug. The issue with CVS has clearly been a heated one. The people who came out to speak were 4-1 opposed to moving CVS to the new location. There's some people who feel that not moving the CVS was a slap at development, but moving a business from one corner to another corner should not be confused with development. I think the people that finally did succumb to the coercion of the applicant, the legal coercion, were fearful that if they didn't have a settlement, that we could have a very ugly CVS in the center of town, and they opted for what they thought were the lesser of two evils. Now, it would be hypothetical of me to tell you how I would have voted. So I'm not going to give you a hypothetical answer to a hypothetical question. But I can say that I respect the decisions of those who voted for and against, because I think they all had their reasons, and they were very thoughtful.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. We will now have a short 5-minute intermission between Mr. Carr and our Democratic Party.
So we know that the last part was a little bit brief, and it was because we only had one candidate up there, and we wanted to make sure that all three candidates on both parties had the same amount of time to speak. So now we're going to continue the forum with our Democratic candidates, who will also be in primary on September 12th. And Sarah would like to introduce our first candidate, Ms. Lynn Pinder.
Mrs. Lynn Pinder has been a resident of Clinton since 1993. She has one daughter, two stepchildren, and one grandson who have or will graduate soon from the Morgan School, and she is married to Rick Pinder, a lifelong resident of Clinton. She has a bachelor's degree in microbiology and a master's in biology, and graduated from Quinnipiac Law School with a concentration in tax law. Lynn worked as a research scientist for 15 years at Yale University and Pfizer, and now is partner in her law firm and owns Pinder Construction Company with her husband. Both businesses are located in Clinton. Lynn has been involved in the community and in town government for many years. As a coach, parent, and town official, seated on nearly a dozen boards, commissions, and subcommittees. She has been seated on the Board of Selectmen for 5 years. Wyatt will now introduce Ms. Christine Goupil.
Thank you. Currently, Christine is in her 8th year and 2nd term representing the Democratic Party on the Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission. Previously at the Princeton's Foundation, led by HRH Prince Charles of Great Britain, Christine worked with a highly qualified team of urban planners, architects, and builders in conjunction with city officials to deliver master plans and community revitalization strategies around the world. Christine also has served on the board of the New York City Parks Enforcement Mounted Auxiliary Unit. With a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York, Christine has actively continued her education at the University of West London and in courses at the Pace Law School and in land use leadership training, Yukon Clear Land Use Academy, and with the Connecticut Council of Municipalities. She and her husband, Alan Felgate, have 2 young boys and a dog. We will now start with the first question, which goes to Ms. Pinder.
Why are you running for the position of First Selectman? What new ideas and/or abilities would you bring to the office?
Okay, so we were told we had a little opening statement. I'm not going to say it, but I do want to thank everyone in the political club and Eric, the school staff, my family. It's funny, I remember sitting here almost 15 years ago and my daughter being one of the first moderators of this debate. Why do I want to run? Why does anyone want to run in this political climate? It's kind of crazy. I've been doing this for about 15 years in town government. I have more experience than I care to remember or forget. I think that I can bring to this office something that's missing. Mainly, I can bring people together. I do it every day at my job. I've shown that I can do it throughout the last 15 years. I think that I can work across the aisle, as Mr. Carr just mentioned. Unfortunately, I actually think I'm going to agree with him on a lot this evening. I don't know why I say unfortunately, sorry, Kirk. I work with Republicans, I work with independents. That to me, I think, is something new, and in this current political climate, I think is so important. It's something that has to happen. So why I want to run, and what new ideas can I bring? Okay, so I think that answers it.
All right, the next question is, describe one way that you've been involved in the town. This can be a committee, subcommittee, etc. Have you previous involvements helped to move Clinton in any way that is today?
That's for me again?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to just mention 2. I'm going to take my time and mention 2. There's a couple of things that I've been involved in pretty heavily over the last 10 years. One is water pollution control. If anyone knows anything about development in this town or the history of this town and the consent order that we've been under, water pollution is hugely important. I was chair of that committee for a commission for, I believe, 3 years, and on it for 4 or 5. Thank you, Willie, he brought me into that. I was integral in starting the process, moving forward to the current facilities plan that will hopefully go forward in this town. Whether or not, with the budget considerations, that will happen, I don't know, I hope it will. It will also help with economic development. I really do believe that I was really important working with DEEP and with the commission to get that moving. Second, the other hugely important thing I think I've done in the last few years, along with some other folks, was to get the LoSAP program the pension/retirement program put through for the fire department, the volunteer fire department. Those guys work so hard for us, and they've been asking for so many years to get that through. And I'm really proud that Willie and I and the committee were able to get that done for them.
All right, now Christine, an opportunity to answer that question. It is a two-part question, so we can repeat either part. Why are you running for the position of First Selectman? What new ideas and or abilities would you bring to the office?
The reason I'm running for First Selectman is during the process of working on planning and zoning commissions, I encountered the fact that we weren't moving forward projects, and the one thing I do bring forward that I haven't seen taking place in town halls, project management. I think there's endless opportunity in Clinton. EDC is very well aware of it. Planning and zoning has experienced what those potential opportunities can be, but we're not extracting what we could get out of them. I believe that at this point, moving forward the town plan conservation development with over 170 action items within it really could make progress in the town. It could increase our grant list, and it could bring in tax revenue, and we need to be able to facilitate those with project management. You need leadership in town hall to bring them together. You also need to be able to bring different boards and commissions together, and you also need to bring the different departments together. At this point, I have never experienced sitting with all the different departments and or the different boards and commissions, and I believe that is absolute priority in terms of dealing with the finances at the state level that are going to impact us, but also to move forward projects.
Thank you. And if you could give us one way or more that you've been involved in the town on either a committee, subcommittee, or a group, and have your previous involvements, do you think, helped to mold Clinton into what it is today?
In particular, I obviously worked on the town plan and conservation development. I won't go into that too much, but that was involving every single board and commission in town, civic organizations, departments, and the public at large. Out of that, one of the top priorities, which was only recently confirmed that we could work on with the consultant planner, is moving forward the regulation changes that could take place at Unilever for adaptive reuse of the site, and the creating regulations that will allow for more intense development, and also potential researching the wastewater opportunities on there for expansion to the downtown. This is necessary because we recently had a grant and were awarded to do a marketing and feasibility study for the site. And that marketing feasibility study really tells us what, in addition to the industrial use, can be done at that site as an adaptive reuse. So we need to move forward that fairly quickly to make sure that we're marketing the site appropriately for developers to come in at an expedited pace.
Great, thank you. And for our next question for Lynn, what would you define as a working relationship between the state of Connecticut and the town of Clinton? How would you improve this relationship, and how would you work with the state and federal government to help our town?
Well, again, I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Kirk said. I mean, this is communication 101. I'm not really sure that the state and town, since Willie left, I know that his communication with the state was amazing. We do have CCM, we do have the River Cog, and we have different entities that are comprised of local leaders who actually do try to help with the communication between the towns and the state. I believe that it's incredibly important, obviously. We have our local representative and senator. Our relationship with them, I don't care what their party affiliation is, has to be rock solid. We need to be in constant communication with them. We can't wait for a crisis in town to go ahead and contact somebody and say, hey, what are you guys going to do? How are you going to help us? We need to be in Hartford. If we can't be in Hartford, or the First Selectman can't be in Hartford, then someone from the Board of Selectmen or a representative needs to be in Hartford. We need to know what's going on. We need to make sure that our needs, whether it's something that we've discussed in our town plan, or it's something that the community has said is important, that those things need to be relayed to Hartford. The state's a mess. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. The money's not there. There's things we need. We talk about grants. We talk about getting help from the state, and the money's just not there. I believe we need to be at the forefront, ahead of every other community, every other town, up there banging on the door constantly. And I think that that's part of the job of the First Selectman. Can't just be sitting in the office and listening to people in town. It has to be, take that and bring it to Hartford. So.
Sure, thank you. And Christine, what would you define as a working relationship between the state of Connecticut and the town of Clinton? And how would you improve this relationship and work with the state and federal government to help our town?
Obviously, everybody's aware of the state issues, and it seems like nothing's functioning. But if you start engaging with some of the departments in the state, things are working very well. I started a housing coalition in town because there's a desperate need for people who can't afford housing in town, deed-restricted housing. And during that process, I've engaged with partnerships for strong communities and the different departments within the state level who are there to support us and make sure that we have the ability to move these things forward. At this point, I think we have to focus on the things that are tangible, working with the circuit rider, with the historic departments up at the state level to possibly create revolving funds within Clinton to protect our historic properties. So like I said, what's going to take place at the state level, I think the infighting perhaps that is taking place and hopefully will be resolved very soon, we need to have communication with our state representatives and insist upon what is necessary for Clinton, but at the same time we need to pick at that low-hanging fruit of those departments we can engage with and get those small projects done within town that are going to support the town.
Thank you. Our next question is to Lynn first. Clinton is on track to lose close to $6 million in education funding from the state. What policies would you propose to manage this issue? Would you propose tax increases, cuts, or restructuring?
Good question. Kirk already answered it. I'm gonna, thanks Kirk. So over 6 million. We've had this on the radar for a long time. We did not just find out about this when it came out in the newspaper after our budget passed. The Board of Selectmen was aware of it. We attempted, and I will say, we worked hard. The school, Mary Ann, did an amazing job understanding that we might lose that money to keep her budget as low as she could. The Board of Selectmen tried very hard to do exactly what Mr. Carr just stated. Try to find places where we could cut, try to find places where we could tighten our belt. Some of those cuts went forward to the Board of Finance and were put back into the budget, unfortunately, and we had a tough season. We had a few losses. First of all, we can't pass a $3.3 million deficit budget gap to the town just merely by a special assessment. It would mean another $2 million increase. That's just with a $1.6 billion grand list. We just can't afford it. So there's a few things we could do. One, nobody wants to hear it, but we could take money from undesignated funds. I think we're running at about a 12% undesignated fund balance right now, so we could take some money from there. The second is really what would amount to, I believe, a complete redoing of the budget process, where we would say, okay, boards, commissions, Board of Ed, everybody's got to go back and look at their budgets again and let us know where you believe you can cut. And I think ultimately there will be some, maybe, passing on in some sort of an increase in the mill rate. I hope that that's not the case. I hope that we do receive the money from the state. I just would like to say that this is not something that just fell out of the sky. I think everybody was aware when they were creating their budgets that we could lose this money. So it's something that the Board of Selectmen thought about, and we tried to, not that we could have alleviated $3.3 million on a $17 million budget, but we could have at least tried to do something. So it could come from a variety of those sources.
Thank you, Ms. Pinder. Now we ask the same question to Ms. Goupil. Clinton is on track to lose close to $6 million in education funding from the state. What policies would you propose to manage that issue? Would you propose tax increases, cuts, or restructuring?
I am aware that the Board of Finance has already found a situation where they can cover $3 million of that, so we're looking at $3 million. I don't think it is feasible in the current budget, or current fiscal state, to cut $3 million from our existing town. I think there is some area that we can make up some of that, and I would recommend creating a shared services committee with department heads sitting on that committee, and possibly some members of the boards and commissions to address some shared services potential. I think we need to reach out to the surrounding towns and start talking about some opportunities for regionalization. I do know the police department has also started having that conversation as well to make up some of the shortfalls. At the end of the day, our grand list is flat. We're not moving forward, so we need to bring in tax revenue, and the only way we're going to do that is through economic development. And the only way we're going to get economic development is if we change our zoning. We're working with antiquated zoning at this point. It's not attractive to developers, and we need to update it. We need to get a town planner and town hall to work with the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Land Use Office to update our zoning so that we're more attractive to developers, so that people actually come into town and we can raise our grand list that way and bring in tax revenue.
Thank you. Response time if she mentioned you by name. Sorry. Kind of feeding into what Christine was talking about, our question to Lynn. What is your plan to encourage economic development in the town? What are your opinions on the current town plan, and do you support any modifications or reforms?
3 questions. Okay, the plan of conservation and development. For everybody, just so they're aware, every town is responsible for having a town plan of conservation and development. We have to have one in place, up to date, every 10 years. The current plan we have actually does call for biennial review. I just want to point out, I haven't read it front to back, but there are some things that could probably be changed or should be changed based on what has happened and occurred in the last couple of years. The Unilever project is not going forward. I know Christine has discussed some ideas and plans for that. Obviously, the old school site, I believe that the plan of conservation and development does not always agree with the current regulations in town. It states that in the town plan of conservation and development that our regulations need to be revamped and rewritten so that it is consistent with it. So I think that presents a problem for planning and zoning when developers come in, because per land use law, they must not only meet the regulations, they generally should be consistent with the town plan. The town plan, unfortunately, is not, it's advisory to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it is a well-drafted and extensive document, but it's been in place for a couple of years. We've seen developers come in, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem to me that many of those developers, whether it's based on opposition from the town, or it's based on the fact that the Planning and Zoning Commission does not believe that they are consistent with the town plan, that they're able to comply. So in my mind, that means maybe we should revisit. You asked 3 questions. Town plan.
Encouraging economic development.
Encouraging economic development. So we're not working in a vacuum in Clinton. We have to remember that the developers come to us. We can do what we want with our town plan, and I think the visions are great, and the visions are awesome, and the best laid plans sometimes don't always come true. We have financing issues. We have developers who are willing to come here. We have market issues that we have to deal with. So yes, encouragement of economic development is absolutely necessary. I agree with Christine. We have to increase our tax base. Those things don't make things happen overnight. But our town plan, our regulations have to be not only friendly, they need to show what we want to happen in town, but we also have to remember that the developers are the ones bringing the money. We can't tell people what to do with their own private property.
Thank you. And the same question to Ms. Goupil. What is your plan to encourage economic development in the town? What are your opinions on the current town plan, and do you support any modifications or reforms?
My plans to encourage economic development in town, and again, I go back to we need a town planner overseeing the land use office, as addition to we need that support at the planning and zoning level so that we can rewrite our regulations and change our zoning. Currently, as I said, we're stagnated and we're not getting the development that everybody thinks we should be getting. We're not attractive to developers because the surrounding towns around us have their zoning updated so that it is consistent with what the market bears. We recently got, as I said, a marketing feasibility study for the Unilever site and surrounding area, and that is pretty close to what market bears right now, and we should be utilizing that to look at our zoning for certain areas of town as to what the developers will do and what will come in for. Sorry, the second question was surrounding...
And your opinions on the town plan modifications and reforms and how the town plan can either spur or inhibit economic growth.
So the town plan of conservation development was approved in November 2015, and from that day, nothing has moved forward. Not one of the action items, except for the most recent one, which is the ad hoc committee formed to work on Unilever, has moved forward. So it's very frustrating for me to watch all these action items within the town plan, which really could spur economic development move forward. The Economic Development Committee has also been very frustrated with it. They have come to the Board of Selectmen with ideas that they would like to move forward. At this point, we need the consultant planner, who we're paying $48,000 a year, to be working for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Currently, he reports to the Board of Selectmen, so we do not have an opportunity to utilize him as much as we would like to do. So, like I said, in terms of economic development, I strongly feel we need to update our zoning based on what the market will bear, and the Plan of Conservation Development is amendable. At any time, it can be amended by motion of Planning and Zoning Commission and through the public process. That's not an issue so much as getting it done and getting the zoning written. I am a strong proponent of design standards. I think that supports the what type of development we want to come into town, and it also gives confidence to developers that they know that the property that they're going to develop is going to reside next to another property that is attractive and will maintain the property values. Currently, we only have design standards in one area of the town, and I feel strongly that we need to adopt further design standards to support the general sense of place and look of Clinton.
Thank you, Ms. Goupil. Now we go back to Ms. Pinder for the next question. Which recent zoning plans are you in favor of or against?
Okay, so I'm a huge proponent of highest best use of properties. So recent decisions that have been made, I've said in application processes for some, I like to see industrial properties being used to their highest best use. So there's been a couple of decisions that have allowed that recently. There was one on Route 145, Christine's going to have to remind me the name of the applicant, the recycling facility on Route 145. Yeah, I understand. I know, and I would love to see something happen there because that's, I believe, a really good place for some industrial use. I actually was for the CVS. A lot of you probably don't want to hear that. I think that the original design that they had brought forward was one that fit in. I think that the property that Mike Milano built on Route 1 is amazing. I think people are forgetting that, and I'm hearing a lot of nothing's happening. But that project actually, I believe, is very well designed and is being very well maintained, and I believe is almost full capacity, if maybe not just for residential. So those are two things that, like I said, industrial use of property, and when folks can come in and work with planning and zoning and then ultimately have a positive outcome for everybody, those are the types of things that I like to see happen. I certainly don't like to see tons of opposition, but like I said, I was for the original CVS plan. So I don't think there's been any other recent things that I had a personal opinion on. So.
Thank you for that answer. And Ms. Goupil, which recent zoning plans are you in favor of or against?
I think everybody probably very well knows what I'm in favor of or what I'm not in favor of. Ms. Pinder spoke of the Milano property. He worked very well with the zoning board and also the ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals, to get that project through. It was quite excruciating for him, and I feel for him, and it shouldn't be that way. It's a type of development that everybody has good feelings about in town, and we should make sure our zoning and our regulations align more with what he's trying to do, which is mixed use. And this is where I'm saying we need to update our zoning regulations. So the process that he went through was not so painful. One project which I'm very much not in favor of, which went through very recently, it was a two-stage process where they had to actually change zoning and then came in with their application. And just to preface it, we currently went from 65% residential to 75% residential in our town. And residential properties really are not bringing in tax revenue. I feel as though it's a regressive tax in town. What we're going to do to bring in tax revenue is through business zones and industrial zones, and they have been encroached on over time because of our poor zoning in town. And until we do that, until we start to expand our business zones and industrial zones and to do higher and better use on those sites, we're going to be stagnated in terms of our grand list. So speaking specifically of the application, our business zone was just recently changed to allow for apartment buildings. That means that residential strictly can be allowed on a site in a business zone, and I feel like that takes away from our grand list. I just do not approve of that at this stage of the direction that Clinton's going in. We need to increase our business zones and industrial. I believe in mixed use, shops, etc. on the lower floors, or mixed within, and apartments above, but not strictly looking at residential in a business zone.
Thank you. And another question, I know you both already touched on this earlier, but could you both go more in depth on the recently prominent issue of hiring a town manager? So we'll start with Ms. Pinder.
So this has been a fun topic over the last few months. So there's no secret out there, I don't believe, in this group that as sitting on the board of selectmen, I actually voted not to send the charter revision inclusion of a town manager to referendum in November. Since that time, as you are aware, there was a petition of over 1,200 folks who signed, and statutorily came back to Board of Selectmen, and we actually did vote to put that forward to referendum. There's, as Mr. Carr again, here I'm mentioning him again, giving him a lot of name time here tonight. There are some glitches, and I'm going to circle back now as to why I actually did not vote to send to referendum in the first place. I am not wholly against the idea of a town manager in the town of Clinton. I have not seen any research that shows me that it would put us in a better position financially, increase our grand list, or help us market this town any better if we hire a $150,000 to $170,000 a year person who is essentially in charge of administrating the town's books and its employees. I believe that in this current fiscal crisis time, and I do believe it's crisis time, we shouldn't be adding more salaries on top of what we already have. I do agree with Christine that a town planner is prudent, and I believe that that's what most people believe a town manager may actually do for us. Now, that said, I'm not entirely against it, but I did believe that the revision committee, as hard as they worked, and I know they worked hard because I previously sat on the charter revision committee myself, they worked extremely hard. I did not believe that the document was ready to go to referendum because of many reasons. One of which I did not catch, and I will say that at the beginning, but there is no effective date for the town manager. If we went in November, it would be 30 days after, effectively leaving us with no government. So rest assured the Board of Selectmen is trying to figure that out, but whoever wins this office will likely have to transfer out of it into a town manager position if there's an affirmative vote on that matter. So I hope that answers the question.
And now we will give Ms. Goupil a chance to answer the question. Would you like it repeated?
Sure.
So I know that you both touched on this earlier, but could you go more in depth on the recently prominent issue of a town manager, and why would you support it, why not?
I'm in support of both the charter reform and a lot of the criteria within it, and also a town manager. I believe politics is killing this town. I truly believe it's sitting on planning and zoning, meeting with the other boards and commissions around town. Decisions sometimes, it's not so much party line, but just decisions are made on personalities, etc., and that's not how we should be operating. I strongly feel that somebody from the outside with professional experience would be able to come in and administrate the policies that would be set forth by the Board of Selectmen and by the First Selectman position underneath them, and eliminate some of the issues that are residing in town, decisions not being made because one person brings it forward over another person. So I did sign the petition. I feel strongly about that. I have been following the progress taking place in Simsbury. They have just moved over to that form of government, and I will continue to follow closely. Regarding the petition that was brought forward and the current status of the charter reform, I know it did go before the Board of Selectmen, and it was also reviewed by the town attorney twice. So I'm concerned that the town attorney had an opportunity to review that document twice, yet did miss a critical date within that document highlighting when the transition would take place. So that's very concerning to me. So thanks.
Thank you. Now our final question, this has been mentioned previously, but for Ms. Pinder, how would you better facilitate communication between town boards and other committees?
Okay, so yes, by charter there is a requirement that we meet once a year. I have always found that in my last 15 years being involved on many boards and commissions to be something that is definitely not suited for making sure things get done. I have actually, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, have over the last couple years had an opportunity to say, hey, let's just see if we can get these groups together and come up with decisions. I think that when something comes up and there might be some, Christine's talking about, maybe personality discourse, or not necessarily political, but when there seems to be something happening between boards and commissions that needs to be dealt with, I think it's important to we can have joint meetings. There's nothing that says in our charter that we cannot have joint meetings between boards and commissions. It's incredibly important to do that. We should not be worried about politics, what party we're in. As Christine said, I'm going to agree completely. Personalities, what we need to be doing as quickly and as possibly and as efficiently as possible, get to the bottom of things and get things done properly. I am a huge proponent of getting things done properly, by charter, by law, by bylaws of boards and commissions. Let's get things done, and it should be the job of the leader, the first selectman, to say, hey guys, let's get in a room and talk about this stuff. What's the problem, and let's get it done. Most of the times those things don't happen in executive session. They can happen out in the public, and I think that's also very important for transparency and whatnot. I'm also a huge proponent of that. So I would encourage constant contact and communication, and I, as First Selectman, personally, I think it would be my job to be at as many meetings as possible, especially those where the community has voiced an opinion one way or another in opposition or in favor of something. I think it's important for the First Selectman to be incredibly in touch with what's happening in town, regardless of whether or not, it might not be important to the person sitting in the office at that desk, but if it's important to one person in this town, it's important to me. And that's how I functioned for the last 15 years on whatever I've sat on, and that's how I would continue to function.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Goupil, would you like the question to be repeated? Okay. How would you better facilitate communication between town boards and other committees?
First and foremost, as a project manager, that is one of the most important roles that you take, and that is what I've always done in my career. Operating as a project manager, you need to bring teams together, you need to set timelines and establish deadlines and expectations from people. So that is one of the first things I would make sure I would take upon myself when I would get in office, along with the Board of Selectmen. Again, I mentioned the Shared Services Committee to address some of the areas of town that we can look for inefficiencies and cost-saving measures. And then again, the town plan of conservation development in the back of that document are endless opportunities for the town, and it calls out the different boards and commissions that should be working together. There should be a lead organization, and then some of the sub-boards that could be working together to move forward some of the policies for our town. I agree with Lynn on a lot of the potential for our town, and regarding working together boards and commissions. I firmly would establish, my first day in office is brown bag lunch once a week. People from the public, businesses, whatever, can come forward, sit around the table, round table format, and everybody just talk about what they think is going on in town. We haven't had an opportunity to meet in that type of forum since really we had the town plan of conservation and development when we had the shred at the town hall, and everybody got together and really talked about what they see as the potential in the town. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to be had, but we just need the leadership to bring it forward and to assemble everybody together to have that communication.
All right, thank you for that response. As we're wrapping it up, we would now like to offer all the candidates, including welcoming Mr. Carr back up onto the stage, to offer a 5-minute closing statement, starting with Lynn and Christine and Mr. Carr.
All right, wow. So we were told we had a 3-minute opening statement, now we have a 5-minute closing.
Well, the first question that we asked,
I know, I'm just kidding. I'm giving her. We were just joking that we put together 3-minute opening statements. Okay, so I'm going to use part of my opening and my closing. So I came here in 1993. I came here as a single mom, and this community opened their hearts to me. Some of you are in this room. Read books to my child in the library, carpooled with me to my first job at Pfizer, shared babysitters with me when I needed one desperately. Immediately, I got involved in coaching and trying to get back. Got involved in the school, got involved in a million things. Because I felt it was my duty. I came from a city. I lived in East Hartford, lived in New Haven, came here, and wow, right? 13,000 awesome people. So, I just want to say that over that time frame, I've gained so much experience. I came from, went from loving this town to knowing this town. I know it well, I know you. I try to listen the best I can. I think it's a really important time to have someone who has experience, the municipal experience that we need. We've gone through a really tough election federally. We didn't, because you guys are mostly Democrats, but we elected, I say we lightly, somebody with no experience for change for change's sake. I don't think, I've heard this a lot in the last few months as I've been talking to people. Change is important, but let's just not vote for change just to have change. A lot of good things have happened in the last 10 years. I want to tell you that I'm not establishment. I'm not sitting in that office as somebody who wants power or who wants First Selectman next to my name. I'm doing this because I care about you. I care about agendas that are important to the town, not to me. I have not once ever voted in 15 years for something because I had a personal agenda or my heart was in it personally. I've done it because I've felt it's in the best interest of the town of Clinton. What else can I say? I truly believe that I would be the person who can give you the experience, the dedication, the promise that I will work with every board and commission in this town and every citizen to the best of my ability. There's a lot of people out there with an open mind. If any of you know me, you know I'm incredibly strong-willed and I can argue with you till the cows come home. But if you give me an alternate opinion, I can look at you and say, oh my God, I didn't think of that. That's great, let's run with it. I'm not somebody who won't listen and work with you. So those are the things I can promise you. I can promise you, like I said, experience, love for this town, knowledge of this town. I'm not afraid to ask for help. I'm a negotiator by trade. And I just want to thank you all for coming tonight and listening to us. This is a huge, huge historic primary. It's crazy. And I really hope you all get out to vote on Tuesday. So thank you.
Thank Thank you, Ms. Pinder. Ms. Goupil, if you'd like to have a 5-minute closing statement.
So my husband and I moved to Clinton before we had kids, and we saw this community with this beautiful beach environment and parks, and such a welcoming community that I've never experienced before. And then we saw the downtown with great infrastructure and bones, and I really felt as though it could boom and prosper. And that's how I got involved with Downtown Revitalization Committee, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Town Plan and Conservation Development. And I truly believe the town plan calls for the many initiatives, and it will increase the tax revenue that's so necessary to lower our taxes, rebuild our infrastructure, support everything from the police department, the fire department, our public schools, our open space, our library, which is so wonderful. And as First Selectman, I really feel as though we need to move that forward, and I will do that forward, and I'll bring the leadership to that. As First Selectman, I'll bring project management and facilitate communication between the different boards and commissions, and long-term strategic planning with department heads. As First Selectman, I will bring professionalism to Town Hall. I will work with the Board of Finance to hire a town planner and guide the Planning and Zoning Commission and Land Use Office on updating regulations and zoning to make our town more attractive to developers. I will lower taxes through smart growth initiatives and to raise our brand list by harvesting those opportunities at Unilever to Stanley Bostitch to the current Morgan School site. I will market Clinton. We've never really fully marketed Clinton. There's so much potential there. I will work with EDC. I will work with the state, the Economic and Community Development Organizations. I will work with the RiverCog, our regional planning agency, and the Chamber to come up with entrepreneurial and smart business development strategies, neighborhood development strategies. I will implement a committee for the Shared Services Committee, implement shared services committees, as I indicated, and I will work with the Board of Finance and again the Department of Economic and Community Development on some of the transparent tax incentives that we can use to bring in the types of developments that we do want. I will dedicate half of every day I am sitting in office to economic development, and the other portions of that time will be dedicated to all the other things that need to be addressed at the First Selectman level. I will do a better job helping people on fixed income. Currently, we have 8.7% poverty rate in Clinton. That is pretty high. We have 77 plus seniors who are on a wait list for affordable housing. I will work with the Board of Finance to create a better structure for our senior property tax program to help people stay in the community who want to stay in the community. So I've spent years learning the governance of Clinton, and I will represent our citizens with ethics and honesty. I'll make Clinton a place to do business and attract new businesses to town, to increase the grand list. I encourage appropriate economic development while protecting our small town character, our open space, and our fragile coastal environment. I've been very forthcoming about my policies, both on my website and on social media, but feel free to contact me at any point should you have further questions about anything I stand for. And thank you so much, Eric Bergman and the Morgan Political Club for hosting us, and to Kirk, Carr and Lynn Pinder for engaging. Thank you.
We would like to welcome Mr. Carr back up to the stage, and I would also like to recognize that Mr. Farmer is here. Sir, if you would like to offer a 5-minute statement, we would be more than happy to provide that. Sure.
Thank you very much. I want to say a special thank you again to Eric and to the administration here, and especially, I think we all have to be very proud of these young people. I'm sure their parents are beaming out here, so would you join me in giving them a round of applause? Well, 2 years ago, I was among many Republicans who were overjoyed that we had elected a majority on the Board of Selectmen and the Republican First Selectman. We expected change, but we got a lot more of the same. When I was out collecting signatures for the primary, I spoke to a lot of Republicans, and there was a universal sense of disappointment, especially with this 10.2% mill rate increase. People in Clinton who love Clinton have lived here often decades, some for generations, are afraid. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to continue to live here because of the rapidly increasing property taxes. Property taxes that are highly regressive and fall most heavily on the people that can least afford it, those people that Christine talked about who are in growing poverty, the seniors who are on fixed incomes. They're also concerned about the loss of industry and stagnating commercial development, but they're equally concerned about development that is unattractive and that actually makes this not a livable place. So they want certain kinds of development, but they don't want all development. So we have to be selective in attracting the kinds of things that will be most commercially feasible. I think Christine's points about the importance of keeping commercial development in commercial areas is really significant, because the fact is residential development does not carry its weight in taxes. The services cost more than the taxes that are derived. That's why Phil Single and I want to offer you better choices through the primary process. And that is why we're running for office. And we know that we cannot accomplish anything without the disappointed Republicans who I spoke to, who come to vote for change. I know Lynn said she didn't want change just for the sake of change. But we do need change that is going to provide lower taxes, it's going to attract commercial development, it's going to fill those empty storefronts, is going to shrink the inventory of unsold homes, and is going to increase your biggest asset, and that is the value of your property. And that's one of the biggest impediments to the value of your property, are the increase in property taxes. There are no easy answers. We've tried to bring this down to 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Working across the aisle is critical, but we have to do some tough things, but we have to do them with ease. We've got to be tough on problems, but easy on people. So those of you who are the disappointed Republicans, who I've spoken to, and many that I haven't, I'm asking you to come out and vote for change, but meaningful change, not just change for the sake of change, when you go to the polls next Tuesday. And I will promise you that Phil and I will never forget who elected us and who we are ultimately responsible to. You, the voters and taxpayers of Clinton. Thank all of you for coming tonight, and now, Mr. Farmer, welcome you to...
Thank you, Mr. Carr.
Glad you could join us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to sit down. I've had a long day already. When I say good evening, ladies and gentlemen, I also, that includes these fine students who I'm sure have put on a great program this evening for you. Debates and forums like this are really great because it gives you a great opportunity to get a better read on people. Primaries give you more choices to think about, which is really very important. I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier, but in today's real world, your first selectman has a responsibility to fight for you, and that takes precedent over this forum this evening, unfortunately. I spent time today in Hartford for a number of reasons. Most importantly, to meet with leaders, local and state, on the state budget. I have been fighting our battle for Clinton all year. We have been told that the budget vote will take place the week of September 11th. And the good news is nobody is in favor of the governor's plan. It was just horrible. Because of the hour, I would ask that you indulge me so that I can take a few minutes and give you an update on what we have been doing the last 22 months since I took office. That 22 months, I have to tell you, went really fast. I've been lucky enough to establish relationships with 3 federal and 11 state legislators, 27 towns and city leaders, 4 economic development commissions outside of Clinton, 3 state and regional organizations, and I sit on 5 different boards. Why on earth do I do that? Because it is critical to have people on our side with influence, especially in these difficult economic times. No matter what you heard here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, our primary drivers for the future success for Clinton must be 4 things: infrastructure, our children's education, which is tremendously important, the long-term financial sustainability of our town, and of course, economic growth. One cannot just focus on one aspect of taxes or development, or even 2 of those factors that I mentioned, because we have to move forward on all 4 fronts. They are all interconnected, and every decision we make impacts all 4 of those drivers. Part of that progress will in fact mean some money has to be spent, but cost effectively and wisely. 22 months ago, my corporate executive responsibility for $38 million of business on a worldwide basis enabled me to hit the ground running as your first selectman. I have already initiated management protocols, employed best business practices, and we now perform cost-benefit analysis. I am the first ever to start reviewing employee performance annually and update their job descriptions. In order to fight the governor's attempt to ruin Clinton financially, I have testified in Hartford and in writing. I have maintained our credit rating 2 years in a row. I work on average 60 hours a week plus on average 3 evening meetings, and I am on call 24/7 for emergency management, dire family situations, threats, stealing, weapons, you name it. I have declined all raises, I take no benefits, and I have kept all of my campaign promises, especially with regard to respect, ethical leadership, and transparency. I formed a task force to look at our future 10-year debt service challenges, and believe me, as Mr. Carr has alluded to, we are going to have some tough challenges going forward. I voted with the Board of Selectmen to lower our budgets on the town side, and the Board of Finance raised the budgets each time. We held a successful statewide transportation meeting at Town Hall to protect our interests. With a big assist from Gary Brisquet, Head of Planning, and Peter Neff, the Director of the Department of Public Works, we are working on a unified Route 1 sidewalk plan, border to border, for growth, safety, and development. I championed Carrie Allen's Greenway and created the Blue Way to connect to the Greenway to introduce all to our pristine shoreline and boating, creating connectivity to both. I steered the Historic Society to save the Stanton House without town funding. We took ownership of all the town streetlights, changed them over to LED, and we will save thousands over the long term. We now have 2 electric vehicle charging stations behind Town Hall paid for by grants. And speaking of grants, we have applied for and received hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant funding since I took office. And we have an approval for Phase 4 of the downtown streetscape that Willie has worked so hard on.
Mr. Farmer, if I may interject, just to keep it fair to the other candidates, we can only give you another minute and a half.
All I need is another minute and a half, okay? For greater efficiency and cost savings, we have begun a process of consolidation of services, supplies, maintenance, repairs, and utility contracts. We are preparing for the coming regionalization of services, our way, not the governor's, for less cost, more control on our part, and improved services. Here's the part everybody's been waiting for. On the economic development front, there are several points to make. We were all saddened to learn that the developer of the old Morgan site could not get financial backing and he terminated the contract. Former Selectman Willie Fritz had worked on this for 2 years before I took the reins. I worked on it another 20 plus months and we were both really very upset, to say the very least. Unfortunately, this event is actually not uncommon in the development world. Fortunately, Clinton is blessed with a prime location already approved for mixed-use development, and fortunately, there are very interested parties, and your Board of Selectmen asks for your patience and understanding as we see that the project moves forward as originally planned. I repeat, as originally planned. We don't want a strip mall there and a big grocery store or a big box store. There is also no interest in the Stanley Bostitch property. And there is positive news on Unilever's site by the train station. An offer has been made to Unilever that looks very promising. We have a go on the new CVS, and the train station expansion is scheduled to go out to bid in April. Lots of things are happening in Clinton. There's an old saying, if you want to get something done, you give it to a busy person. I'm done.
We're going to have to cut you off right there. I apologize. We couldn't give you more time. I would like to thank Ms. Goupil, Ms. Pinder, Mr. Carr, and Mr. Farmer for their participation tonight in the forum. As I mentioned earlier, the candidates will be out in the lobby outside of the auditorium. If you wish to speak with them, Mr. Farmer will be there as well. Thank you guys all for attending tonight, and don't forget to get out there and vote in the town hall next Tuesday, September 12th.
Nice.